we'll have our first speaker, Seth Powell, who does not need an introduction. He is the founder of Yoga Studies. And without further ado, Seth, the floor is yours for your paper. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Borian, for presiding and for that introduction. Greetings, good evening, everyone from Cornwall in the UK, where I'm traveling right now with my family. Thank you so much to Chris, to the Arihanta team, as well as to Suzanne and Peter, the YDYS team, Yoga Research team. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all online. And I have to say, I'm excited to see many of you in person in Paris next May. A brief disclaimer before I begin, an apology. The talk that I'm going to be giving today is very similar to the one I gave at the previous YDYS conference in Hamburg, as well as the Yoga Vidya online conference at Yogic Studies. So apologies if you've heard some of this before, but I think it follows up really nicely to what we just heard, and hopefully in conversation with Anya's talk, hopefully it can lead to some fruitful discussion. Let me try and share my screen and we will begin. Whoops. All good, Borian? Thumbs up? Okay. So today, the practice of chanting mantras might seem commonplace. Whoops. Spoilers. The practice of chanting mantras might seem commonplace for many practitioners of postural yoga. For example, the opening or closing of a yoga class with the mantra Om, singing kirtan, or other devotional yogic practices. Therefore, it might come as some surprise that in most medieval Sanskrit Yogaśāstras that teach the methods of Hatha Yoga, teachings on mantra are largely absent or assume a lesser status. As Mallinson and Singleton have pointed out, early texts such as the Amrita Siddhi and the Goraksha Shataka make no mention of mantra whatsoever. Perhaps the most influential text on modern yoga, on Premodern Haṭhayoga, Svatmarama's 15th century Haṭhapradīpikā, merely states that a yogi in samadhi cannot be wounded by any weapon, killed by any person, or overpowered by mantras and magic. And here the phrase is mantra tantra, and some manuscripts include the phrase mantra yantra. Either way, suggesting a Sanskrit catchphrase meaning something like mumbo jumbo. By the 12th century, Sanskrit texts on yoga commonly speak of a fourfold schema of yoga systems, namely mantra, laya, hatha, and raja yoga, often but not always in that order. Typically, the four yogas are presented as a progressive hierarchy, with the first three yogas culminating or paving the way for the royal practices of raja yoga. Some texts, likely drawing on the Amrita Siddhi, provide a sliding scale of four aspirants, with the grades of weak, mridu, moderate, madhya, great, adimatra, or outstanding, adimatrama. The Dattātreyayogaśāstra states that the weak person is entitled to practice mantra yoga. He of little intellect, alpa buddhi, practices this yoga. He is the lowliest of aspirants, for this mantra yoga that has been taught is said to be the lowliest of yogas. This is repeated in the Shiva Samgita, which further describes the weak aspirant as follows. Lazy, very ignorant, sickly, offensive to his guru, greedy, evil-minded, gluttonous, lecherous, fickle, cowardly, diseased, servile, nasty, badly behaved, and feeble. The weak man is to be known thus. He attains perfection after 12 years of striving. A guru should certainly consider him to be entitled to practice mantra yoga. So a pretty bad report card from your guru, but nonetheless, even the weak aspirant is said to attain siddhi or perfection after 12 years. Later, in the Dattātreyayogaśāstra, mantrasādhana is listed actually as one of the obstacles to yoga practice, alongside laziness, associating with rogues, alchemy, and digging for buried treasures. So why is there such hostility towards mantra yoga and mantra sadhana in these texts? It appears that in the eyes of the authors of these Hatha Yoga texts, traditional mantra praxis was associated with elaborate tantric ritual, black magic, and other religious practices that were deemed to hold little soteriological value for the Hatha yogi who is concerned with controlling the breath and mastering the vital energies of the body. So does that mean that medieval Hatha yogis did not practice mantras? It's worth noting that in sculptural representations of Hatha yogis performing asanas found at the temple complexes at Hampi and other Vijayanagara sites, as I have detailed in 2 articles on the subject, the yogis are commonly depicted with akshamalas, or rosary beads, in hand, sometimes even while performing quite complex balancing asanas, as you see here. Now, we might question whether this detail is simply an artistic embellishment or whether it is faithfully representing a lived yogi practice and experience. Balancing on one hand with your leg behind your head and chanting Om Namah Shivaya on beads with your free hand seems a bit odd to me, but not impossible. However, as an ubiquitous feature of Indian ascetic and yogic cultures, surely Hatha yogis were chanting mantras. What I wish to highlight here in this presentation is a particular textual attitude towards mantrasadhana that is displayed by the authors of the Yogaśāstras, who were perhaps seeking to bolster the soteriological value, the status of Hatha yoga above and against other systems of yoga. Rather than dispensing with mantras entirely, however, I argue that the redactors of these texts reconfigure mantra praxis within the domain of pranayama. Drawing on their tantric predecessors, they interiorize mantric syllables within the very breath and body of the yogi. This, of course, is the famous Hamsa or Soham mantra, which we were just discussing earlier, comprised of the inhalation and exhalation of the breath, which is also known as the ajapā mantra, the unuttered mantra. The origins of the Hamsa mantra are beyond the scope of this paper, but are likely found within the early Shaiva tantras. Important attestations. Oh, excuse me, I skipped a paragraph here. First, a note, before we get into Shaiva tantras, on the Sanskrit term Hamsa. I will not wade into the debate among ornithologists as to whether Hamsa should be interpreted as swan, goose, or wild goose, though I think McComas Taylor makes an excellent argument for wild goose. But what is important for our purposes is that by the time of the medieval Yogaśāstras, Hamsa already has an ancient pedigree as a symbol for supreme beauty, wisdom, and transcendence in the Sanskritic traditions. Hamsa is the Vahana of Brahma Deva, the goddess Saraswati, as well as the goddess Gāyatrī. But when does Hamsa become a mantra? So as I said, the origins of this mantra are beyond the scope of this paper, but likely to be found within early Shaiva tantras. So an early attestation can be found in the Svachanda Tantra, as well as in the Parakya Tantra. And in this context, Hamsa is equated with the divine nature of Shiva himself, but also it's already connected with the breath. Shiva is by his own nature Hamsa, the dazzling sun is Hamsa, the self is also called Hamsa, and breath, prana, goes along with Hamsa. The 11th century commentator Kshemaraja explains on this verse that the syllable sa refers to the out-breath. The syllable hum goes with the in-breath. This is also how it's taught, importantly, in the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. The vital principle goes out with the syllable sa, sakarena, and goes in and down with the syllable ha, hakarena. It constantly repeats this mantra, hamsa, hamsa. It is repeated day and night, 21,600 times. This japa of the goddess, which is explained, is easy. It is difficult only for fools. There's a few things to note here. First, you may be wondering, and maybe you've heard this number, 21,600 times, which is repeated in many texts. This number derives from the notion of a natural 4-second breath. You can test this out for yourself. In a 24-hour day, there are 86,400 seconds. You can double check my math. 24 hours times 60 minutes times 60 seconds. If we then divide this by the 4-second breath, this yields the total number of 21,600 breaths. That is said to be constantly being breathed through us every day. Moreover, this mantra is said to be easy, sulabha, and it is the japa of the goddess, Devi, which in this context, in the Vijnana Bhairava, is being identified with the goddess Kundalini. Now, another important text on tantric yoga, the Sharada Tilaka Tantra, provides important teachings on Hamsa, which I believe were also informative to the later Hatha yoga traditions. And here the Hamsa mantra is designated by the technical term ajapā, the unpronounced or unuttered mantra. It states that the hum syllable with the bindu refers to the male purusha principle, while the saha syllable with the visarga refers to the female prakriti principle. When ajapā reaches a state of identification with the two, then it is said to become soham. Having elided the letter S and the letter H furthermore, one should connect what remains according to the Purva Rupa rule. This then becomes the pranava, i.e. Om. Okay, so here we see the important reversal then. Sometimes we hear this mantra as hamsa and soham, and this text is explaining what is happening here. The syllables hum and saha are flipped. Then, due to the Sanskrit rules of visarga sandhi, the saha becomes so, and the avagraha is added to hum to make it aham, or I. We are then left with the infamous non-dual dictum, that I am, or I am that, i.e. I am Shiva in the Shaiva context. And then we are told, moreover, due to this grammatical rule of Purva Rupa, which signifies the substitution of a letter for itself and the following letter, the S and the H are dropped from soham, and we are left with O and or Om. So further work remains to be done, but what is clear is that over time, many different meanings and associations were grafted onto the Hamsa or Soham mantra by various texts and traditions. During the second millennium, as more and more Sanskrit texts on yoga were being redacted, the Hamsa ajapā was embraced by the nascent Hatha and Raja yoga traditions. And according to the authors of the texts, it appears to be the mantra of choice for yogis, perhaps even replacing traditional mantra japa. Numerous texts, as you can see, feature the ajapā mantra, including the Vivekamartanda, the Yoga Bija, Śivayogapradīpikā, the Goraksh Upanishad, many of the so-called Yoga Upanishads, the Garanda Sangita, Yoga Vishaya, and even the aptly named Hamsa Upanishad. So the Hamsa mantra actually even gets its own Upanishad. The Vivekamartanda may be the earliest Hatha Yoga text to teach the Ajapā mantra, which is said to bestow liberation upon yogis. Here we can see it appears to borrow the verse that we just looked at from the Vijnana Bhairava, but with an important twist. So here's the Vijnana Bhairava verse above. Vivekamartanda reads, the vital principle goes out with the syllable ha and goes in and down with the syllable sa. It constantly repeats this mantra, hamsa, hamsa. So note that the order of the letters and the breath has changed. It's now the opposite of the Vijnana Bhairava and other Shaiva tantras. In the Vivekamartanda, the breath goes out with ha and comes in with sa. So I wonder if this was an intentional change by the redactor of the Vivekamartanda, or if perhaps there's another explanation for this. As we'll see, importantly, most of the Hatha Yoga texts teach the Hamsa in the manner of the Vivekamartanda. The text continues, this, the Gayatri called ajapā, bestows liberation upon yogis. Merely by thinking of it, a man is freed from sin. There never has been nor never will be a mantra like ajapā, an austerity like ajapā, or a meritorious action like ajapā. And Gayatri, the mantra starting with Om, which bears prana, arises from Kundalini. Who knows her, knows yoga. The identification of ajapā with the name Gayatri is a line found repeated in numerous other texts. As Mallinson and Singleton have suggested, we might view this as the yogic appropriation of the principal Vedic Gāyatrī mantra. Just as the Gayatri is the quintessential mantra of the Vedas for Brahmins, the unuttered ajapā Gayatri of the breath is the only mantra necessary for yogis. And moreover, like in the Vijnana Bhairava, the Gayatri is said to arise from the goddess Kundalini. In the Yoga Bija, the Lord said, with a ha sound, the breath goes out, and with a sa, it enters in. This is the mantra, hamsa hamsa, all beings repeat it. Because of the Guru's teachings, the repetition is reversed in the Sushumna. When soham is achieved, it is called Mantrayoga. Because of Mantrayoga, the realization of soham arises in the central channel. So here we are told that when the Hamsa mantra is reversed to soham in the central channel, on account of the Guru's teachings, then it is known as Mantrayoga. That is to say, the breath is brought into the central channel, a key concept in Hatha Yoga. Following these earlier texts, the teachings on ajapā are further elaborated in the 15th century Śivayogapradīpikā. This text, which was the subject of my doctoral dissertation, is ascribed to a Virashaiva author named Chenna-Siddha Śivayogi, who likely lived in Andhra Pradesh. Yet despite the author's Shaiva orientation, the text does not prescribe outwardly Shaiva or sectarian mantras, but rather adopts the yogic ajapā in line with other Yogaśāstras of its time. In the Ashtanga section of the text, and notably within the discussion on prāṇāyāma, we find a summary of the teachings on ajapā that we've reviewed thus far. This seed or bija, comprised of the letter ha with the bindu, hum, goes outwards. The seed comprised of the letter sa with the visarga, saha, goes inwards. Note again that the text follows the Vivekamartanda's scheme. The vital energy of the breath is what induces and ceases the activity of all beings. Thus, the embodied soul, the jiva, chants the Gayatri called ajapā every day and night, 21,600 times. A person who recites it at sunrise in the manner taught by the illustrious Guru, he reaps the fruits of ajapā. Continues. When the ajapā Gayatri mantra with 2 syllables merges in the triple confluence, the sound becomes Om. From bringing one's attention to this mantra called ajapā, a person is liberated from sins. He swiftly obtains Śivayoga. There is no doubt. So here the Śivayogapradīpikā has added another layer, yet another layer to the practice. The triple confluence, the Triveni Sangama, is not a reference to the meeting of the 3 external rivers, but rather in yogic terms, the meeting place of the 3 primary energy channels, the Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna nadis. How exactly does ajapā become Om? Well, similar to what we found in the Sharada Tilaka, having made it reversed as soham, the mantra of the self, in which the 2 syllables are expressed as oneself and the supreme, the yogi should take away the 2 consonants and again refashion it as the divine mantra Om. Then, having joined it with the nasal sound, the anusvara, it is the best of all mantras. He who leads it to the Brahmanadi is full of bliss. He attains release from the bondage of karma. So we can understand the yogic operation as follows. The natural hamsa of the breath is brought into the sushumna, where it gets reversed to so-hum. When so-hum is brought up and merges at the triple confluence, the consonants are removed. The S is taken away from so, the ha from hum, and we are left with o plus ma. But then the anusvara is added, the dot under the M, and we get om. In this way, the essence of the Vedas, om, is represented as the pranic achievement within the mind-body apex of the yogi. In the Śivayogapradīpikā, these teachings on the ajapā Gāyatrī mantra precede teachings on the three bandhas, or yogic locks, that together with om enable the yogi to attain the highest prāṇāyāmic state of kevala kumbhaka, where the yogi is said to remain in a breathless, or rather beyond breath state. Okay, so to conclude, don't worry, Borean, I'm wrapping up here. To conclude, surveying the pre-modern Sanskrit literature on Hatha Yoga, at first glance, it would seem that mantra japa or mantrasādhana is irrelevant, missing, or viewed pejoratively. Indeed, the traditional practice of japa, or the chanting of mantras of deities, is not particularly favorable. It's associated as a practice for the weak-minded or the lazy, or with negative connotations of black magic and treasure hunting. However, rather than throwing out mantra praxis entirely, I've argued that mantra japa is interiorized as the ajapā, the natural and unuttered mantra of the inhalation and exhalation. Drawing on the tantric teachings found in texts like the Vijnana Bhairava and the Sharada Tilaka, this ajapā is further developed within the domain of Hatha Yoga as a key aspect of pranayama practice. This mantric breath, which is unconsciously being repeated 21,600 times a day, is consciously manipulated by the yogi, who uses the hamsa or ajapā Gāyatrī as a vehicle for liberation. Thank you so much, and look forward to your questions and discussion.